After this next Nalik kill, we're gonna watch the death of New World video. Now the game is not dead, but there's there's that YouTuber, I forgot his name. I've seen some of his videos. He'll basically tell you why each game is dead. He does the research and he investigates. Pretty wild. I want to see what he says about New World. nerdSlayer. You know, I think he's. I mean, I don't know who nerdSlayer is as a person. I'm assuming he's probably some dude that just plays a lot of MMOs. I mean, I don't know. I'll watch the video and see what he's about with when it comes to MMOs. Let's see what he has to say.
Sometimes, despite signs of life, a game is far more dead than we realize. In moments like that, I have to be willing to stake my name on what I believe to be a certain future for the game in question.
Damn.
New World is a game I have a personal history with, being an alpha tester who even stepped foot into their game's studios. So no matter how this comes across, you can trust it's from a person with a perspective on the whole thing.
Which basically means that he is a fan of sandbox games and PvP. I'm going to note that to myself right off the bat.
New World, developed by Amazon Game Studios and published by Amazon, is an MMORPG survival-style action game that launched back in September of 2021. New World initially would wow the internet with impressive visuals and sounds, having an impressive near million-person peak player count on Steam, before plummeting in only a few months, down 90% of its player base. Why was New World unable to sustain its massive initial successes? And why am I featuring it on the series before it's technically dead yet, besides that not being the only requirement to make the series? Well, detectives and those new to the channel, you will have to wait to find out more, as we will uncover the biggest clues and present our evidence at the very end of the episode for the final deduction concerning the largest contributing factors for the death of a game, New World. Stay tuned to the very end of the episode to catch a hint on what the next episode might be.
World of Warcraft better not be the next episode. You kidding me?
Hello everybody, I'd like to welcome our sponsor for this video. It's Towelliee.
What?
Towelliee is a 9-time award-winning men's skincare product recognized in Men's Health, Esquire, and Ask Men.
That's nice. Can we get to the video?
And back to the mystery, detectives.
The fuck? Skincare?
Amazon Game Studios, which is where the story begins, was formed back in 2012. When Amazon bought action shooter developer Double Helix 2 years later in 2014, they got a head start. Double Helix was founded back in 2007 and had mostly forgettable titles like Battleship and Silent Hill Homecoming, but managed something half-decent with Killer Instinct back in 2013.
Half-decent?
Double Helix would form the backbone of Amazon Game Studios. Amazon had only ever sold games as a distributor, but had expressed more interest in creating their own video game developer in-house, which explained the AGS initiative. AGS, or Amazon Game Studios, initially would create mobile games and otherwise not so noteworthy titles. But that's not Amazon enough, surely. September of 2016, and Amazon would announce not just one, but 3 major titles, including one we have already covered on the series, Crucible, and one that we are covering on this episode, New World. New World was set to be a sandbox survival MMO based on the colonization of the Americas with a supernatural twist. New World was described as allowing players to choose between playing as a farmer, a crafter, or an adventurer, as well as focus on building camps and towns to survive the harsh environment. Even the journalist describing the game in their article likened it to Rust, or an Ark-type MMO, with colonialism thrown in there. Whatever you were likening it to, an MMORPG is one of the most complex genres, and Amazon was signing up right at the top. Amazon being willing to jump right into the field might be super exciting, but no matter how much money they would put in, if they didn't understand how an MMORPG works, then it would be mostly for naught. We've seen this happen time and time again on the series, with big players entering the online space.
Yo, chill. Was that Matrix Online?
MMORPG works, then it would be mostly for naught. We've seen this happen time and time again on the
Yo, that was Matrix Online, bro. An APB. Oh my god.
series, with big players entering the online
APB
space
was cool. We played
only
that on
to
some
leave
Sunday
with their
a bunch.
tail between their legs. There were next to no details concerning New World for the next 2 years following the announcement, as typically expected of an MMO that can sometimes have a development cycle of 5 years. Instead, one of the 3 announced titles was already being shuttered. Breakaway, which I managed to also alpha test and never let people forget about it because it was their earliest failure, them being AGS, was being shut down before it even launched back in March of 2018. This apparently would now bring more focus to the other 2 titles, Crucible, and relevant for our story, New World. June 15th, 2018 is when I personally enter the story, and while there's not always an inside scoop on the death of a game series, on special occasions like this we get a view from the inside from your trusty, local neighborhood detective. AGS would contact a few of us streamers or YouTubers, and mostly guys who played survival games and a couple MMO players, and have us fly out to their studios in Irvine, California. Not only would we become alpha testers, we were some of the earliest and highest profile testers stepping foot into the test studio that, by the way, used to be a breakaway esports room for our 4-hour-long sessions that we took. That version of New World was far more raw than what people were probably used to or exposed to. You didn't have set cities, instead you had building, and you could build freeform-wise like a true survival game. There was next to no lore in the game, and there was barely any points of interest. On top of that, it utilized a criminal system where you could flag and then kill another player and take their drop stuff. At this point, I already recognized that New World's team was utilizing an outdated criminal system, and because of this, the system would probably be easily exploited. I tried to show this to developers by running around and PKing the other content creators on repeat, and in my feedback I also made sure to mention that it was a problem. If you study other MMORPGs of the past, you should know that you can't trust players to make good decisions without building a system to facilitate such. If you have a criminal system with no nuance other than being flagged or not, inevitably people will abuse such a simple system. It's frustrating because people think it's indicative of a PvP-focused game just being destined for failure, but in my opinion it has more to do with the fact that the criminal system itself, like other systems presented in New World sadly, by 2018 was already outdated by easily 15 years. Other things mentioned for feedback for New World by content creators were more lore and just reasons to care about the world in general. Sure, it was a sandbox, but there still needed to be more in that sandbox to make people care about building in said sandbox. We also echoed in unison that we enjoyed the Dark Souls combat approach that was more prevalent early on in the game, and felt like New World should lean more into that, as well as take inspiration in the dangerous world that we were discovering, which felt at the moment pretty empty and lifeless, but could have a certain Dark Souls element to it that would be pretty enjoyable. It felt like all in all it was a really productive feedback session. How much they took in the end, of course, we don't really know, but we did sit in front of pretty much the major developers on the project and sat up individually and gave our piece. Sometime near the end of 2019, New World would shift the game to a buy-to-play business model pre-launch from a free-to-play one. There's a bit of speculation as to why this is, such as lack of faith in the product, and I don't think that it's ever been properly addressed, but AGS would allow the early backers of the game at least to get it for free. Nearly 2 years after I reported the issue to New World devs when testing their game, they would finally respond to the criticism and rampant PK issues in their game, January 2020, by shifting the game completely away from PvP altogether by straight removing the criminal system. This was seen as a solution to some players, and while in some ways it was more of a band-aid fix. Instead of fleshing out the criminal system and attempting to add like karma to it and fix it, they just removed the whole thing. But it's not a real solution because New World was primarily built on conflict, through creating bases and places.
Let me just say straight up, if New World would have launched with all this sandboxy building criminal system thing, it would have been DOA. It would have been dead on arrival. The best thing they did was to shift more toward theme park, because that is what is going to bring you users. I am not disagreeing at all with what this dude is saying. He knows his shit, but he seems more of like one of those sandboxy hardcore players that likes small, tight-knit community games and not big games like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy and stuff like that. He is not a theme park player. You can tell right off the bat. He may know about this sandbox stuff, but he's not looking at the decision New World made from a business standpoint, right? New World succeeded in their launch. They succeeded for about 3 to 4 months, and then they tapered off. They fell off. We know that. But if it would have launched with this system, it would not have almost broken Twitch records. It wouldn't have gotten Steam records almost in the top 5 games ever purchased. It wouldn't have hit any of those numbers at all. It would have literally been DOA, because the demographic for MMORPGs is not this YouTuber. It's the other casual players that started playing the game when it first launched.
Places you live and operate out of, and then fighting over these. That was kind of the point of New World. It lacked any real storytelling and even basic questing. It felt like the AGS team, with the PvP changes, were just taking their ball and going home. This meant that AGS a year before launch was going to drastically switch the focus of New World in the way that we haven't really seen before. From PvP sandbox to PvE theme park. Something game director Scott Lane confirmed in one of the developer chats that were released. With Crucible shut down already, AGS was 2 for 3 on failed games, with New World not even launched yet but already suffering from immense issues. A lot was riding on New World being a success, which was originally set to launch May 2020,
it was the right
but
move.
Then delayed significantly following the PvP changes and the feedback received from testers, all the way to spring 2021. AGS would express a desire to add more features and content, including more middle and in-game experiences, because there just weren't any. Sandbox games don't typically need them as much because the players can flesh that content out themselves. This would give New World roughly a year to shift their game to a more PvE-centric MMO, which arguably wouldn't be enough time.
Definitely
to elaborate,
not.
another large non-ignorable issue with switching to a PvE-centric typical MMO in-game content model design style, that's a mouthful, is that it's one that's not particularly long-lasting. Think of in-game raids and dungeons. After you've completed them a few times, you don't really have a reason to redo them. The shelf...
Whoa, stop it. Who is this guy? What? Wait. Let me rewind that and see that again. I want to hear that statement again, one more time.
In-game content model design style, that's a mouthful, is that it's one that's not particularly long-lasting. Think of in-game raids and dungeons. After you've completed them a few times, you don't really have a reason to redo them. The shelf life on...
I don't know, man. I've been playing PvE raids for God knows how long, almost 2 decades, and I replay them all the time because there's always something to do with it. I'm telling you, this guy is not a theme park player. He is this guy is a sandbox player. He does not farm raids. He does not farm like Mythic Plus or Ultimates or EX Trials or any of that. This guy is about team building and shit. He's right. He's right, but he's not right because it's his opinion that redoing raids and dungeons is like boring or not cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, who the fuck wants to do a raid in WoW and only clear it once and get all your gear in one shot? How boring is that? That's some casual Care Bear shit that we probably almost might have gotten in Zereth Mortis had, players not have bitched as much.
On that sort of content is very short, and thus it's a bit of a perishable good. Think of the sandbox MMO as more of non-perishable goods, because the players can constantly create their own content, thus it's long-lasting. New World suddenly shifting from a sandbox-style game to a more theme park-style game wasn't exactly an easy switch. Theme park content is quite competitive and extremely expensive, but my hypothesis on it is that it's not sustainable due to design. It's very hard to do sustainably with the constant drive for more content and bigger and better content. In fact, the only developers who have done it realistically are pretty much the biggest developers in the space, because they can afford it. New World was going to struggle to just walk into an entirely new, different game direction and compete with the likes of Square Enix, ZeniMax Online, ArenaNet, and even Jagex. After taking a year off to refocus the game, the start of 2021 wasn't any kind...
By the way, Greg from AGS, my boy, I'm still waiting for my hat.
Off to refocus the game, the start of 2021 wasn't any kinder to Amazon Game Studios, as the company would be plagued with reports of severe dysfunction within the studio amidst the shift in design. Surely New World had immense pressure on it, with 2 of the 3 gaming efforts of AGS already being major failures, and outlets like Bloomberg questioning if they could even make a good game in the first place. While Amazon is pouring $500 million into video game development, not only are there calls of dysfunction, there's also accusations of toxic bro culture concerning Amazon Game Studios too. It felt like Amazon's desire to skip through the process a bit by buying its way through, they had seemingly picked wrongly in their leadership. For starters, they didn't even pick a leader with gaming experience. You heard that right. Mike Frazzini, the leader of the games division at the time, hadn't even made a game before. According to a Bloomberg report, Frazzini would reportedly frustrate developers with basic takes and had trouble differentiating between gameplay and concept footage. But that's not the worst of it. Sure, upper leadership guy without hands-on experience and being out of touch isn't the craziest thing. Head of games department or not, right? I think. The worst of it is when you start to peek into the portfolios and experience of the other experienced game developers tasked on Amazon's new MMORPG New World. Let's start with the game director featured quite prominently, Scott Lane. Scott was a producer who worked on wrestling games, shooters, and a few top RPGs.
Let's see. WWE All-Stars was okay. Yo. TNA Impact, bro. I'm sorry, you can't, let's see, Unreal 2? Damn, he worked on Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance too. That's a good fucking one right there. Let's see, what else is there? Hunter the Reckoning, that one was all right.
Not online RPGs or MMOs in sight,
some hits and misses
there.
That's
fine, he's a producer. What about the actual developers, right? Well, the design lead worked on Killer Instinct and Silent Hill Homecoming. The combat lead had a similar history because, well, Amazon acquired Double Helix, and these are Double Helix developers. Well, that's fine. If they have someone experienced as a game systems leader, they could just teach the other developers how the systems work. Gears of War? And the dude's primarily an artist? For a systems designer? At this point, I started to just dig deeper out of curiosity, and a deep growing sadness sinking within. The UX lead was a Madden developer. The world lead was about the only guy with MMO experience. Just too bad it was a failed MMO.
They made a Tron game?
The narrative leader? No other credits. Even the AI lead has a lacking position, with a developer who was previously a character designer. Now, my intention is not to announce all of these developers are just incapable of offering good perspectives, or they suck, or whatever else. My point is that why would you pump this much money into video game development for one of the most ambitious games in game development, and then hire essentially nobody with actual MMO experience?
I will say, I didn't know any of this shit till now, but with their background experience and what they actually gave us, I'm actually pretty impressed. Like, content, graphically, sounds. I'm actually impressed. I'm the opposite of this guy. I'm not even looking at the negative. I'm like, wait a minute, these guys did not know how to make a single MMORPG, but they actually made this one? Yeah, but look at the bugs. Yeah, sure, but look at the world, though, that they created. Yeah, I don't care about fucking dupes and bugs right now. I'm just talking about what they created in general. Not bad for a team that didn't know shit about MMOs.
It's like if I was some billionaire who entered into the phone business, but I never actually used or was familiar with industry standards in phones. You can probably assume no matter how much money I would pour into it, my phone wouldn't be competitive for a number of reasons, no matter how many flip phone companies I would acquire. And when I encountered common problems, I wouldn't know how to deal with them due to just having no experience. Alright, we can just ditch the crappy phone analogy. The point is that New World was being helmed by guys with no MMO experience. That's absolutely ludicrous to me on its own, because Amazon can just pay themselves out of that problem quite easily. But on top of that, I don't even know how many MMOs these devs were even playing or had played. That might sound like I'm just making a bold claim and just going a little bit too far, but I'm basing it off of a few things. For starters, I've spoken to devs, and I spoke to one that worked at SOE, and he stated that it's fairly common on MMOs for people making decisions to have no MMO experience, let alone development experience. Secondly, when I was at the AGS office, I noticed that when I made certain, in my opinion, industry standard or well-received feature remarks, and the industry, and, referenced them, the devs seemed to be quite impressed. While I take my testing job quite seriously, and of course I think highly of myself, contract pay or not, many of the things I was offering as advice and ideas for AGS were just lifted from some of my favorite MMOs, like Arcade,
sure.
Star Wars Galaxies, and Warhammer, and even other survival games like Rust and Conan Exiles. I could be reading too much into that, but I think that the story of New World is one of a bunch of likely talented developers who think or thought they could make an MMORPG without actually learning how, or going through the process on a smaller scale. Whether that's the fault of leadership and trusting in the wrong people, or the developers taking on something just too grand. Who knows? New World would face another delay in February of 2021, this time to August in the fall. Instead, AGS would utilize this time to close beta test New World, which isn't a bad idea. The reason we have to cover delays as a negative thing is New World was set to launch a year before. It's one thing to have a delay or two, but by the point the game is nearing years off its initial targeted launch date, which just screams that it wasn't very realistic to begin with. Closed beta in the summer was supposed to highlight what New World had in store, with their shift to a more PvE-centric theme park-style game, and all of that. What it showed.
It's not like anything insane was going on in the world in 2020 and 21, right, guys? Like, yeah, but I think New World was the only game with a delay during that entire time. I don't know.
Showcased was simplistic questing that
Nothing
seemed
was
to
happening.
take
We
all
were
of 30
fine.
minutes to write and come up with, where you must go
Nothing
here,
important.
interact with the same objects over and over again, or do the PvP variant where you run here and then stand there for 2 minutes. I wasn't very impressed with the changes, as there would be no reason effectively to even flag for PvP anymore, and the game's lackluster PvE wasn't going to help matters either. When I say that New World and closed beta actually had lackluster PvE, what I mean is just literally. I actually enjoyed the gameplay loop itself and had a good time. I thought it was quite fun to play when the guns still shot projectiles especially. The problem is that outside of that gameplay loop, there wasn't much redeeming concerning the PvE in New World to begin with. It was below the industry standard for the time and below standards even set by MMOs back in the early 2000s. There was next to no main story, very little individual story, and the quests were nearly 22 years old feeling. Say what you will about titles like TSW, SWTOR, ESO, and Final Fantasy XIV, but they upped the level of expectation for story and PvE content in MMOs and MMORPGs. New World seemed to be
Somebody's
a regression.
anti-World of Warcraft,
to fail
it
in
seems.
comparison in everything but visuals in the action combat offering. Meanwhile, throughout the closed beta on the nicest graphics cards, New World was literally bricking them.
True.
Which is an absolutely horrible look, and to me screams not being properly optimized.
True.
As the August launch date would creep closer and closer, another delay would hit New World, this time a shorter month-long delay to focus on the game polish. When New World did launch though, could we trust it was really ready after all of these delays? New World would launch globally September 28th, 2021, after some time being delayed. Finally, AGS's Final Horseman was unveiled and set to try to wow the Twitch and MMORPG audience. According to Bezos and what I was told by AGS, the expectation for New World would be that it would remain a top 10 viewed title on Twitch. It was able to accomplish that temporarily, at least, even managing to impressively sell a few dozen million copies
for 3 months.
According to Steam Spy.
Not bad.
Where on Steam it was able to peak at just under 1 million players peak and 500,000 average concurrently, making the top 10 most played list. New World on aggregate review website Metacritic would score a 70 out of 100 from 35 different critics, with a slightly poorer review score from users at 5.5 out of 10, which isn't half bad at all and certainly salvageable, especially with that amount of players playing the game. PC Gamer, who gave New World a 60 out of 100, would state in closing that concerning the game, New World's engaging crafting and faction rivalries are held back by abysmal PvE and a boring world. IGN, who would score the game the same, 6 out of 10, in their review would claim, New World is a very pretty survival MMORPG hybrid that saves its best moments for the endgame, but you have to be willing to grind like hell to get to them. Now personally, I wouldn't trust a critical review on an MMORPG as they typically don't even play anywhere close to the amount of hours you would need to play to form a true opinion, but they also just historically are quite poor. Playing New World at launch felt actually worse than the previous installments in my eyes, because the combat and animations now felt a bit snappier and more typical MMO feeling, less Dark Souls-like, which is kind of what we all initially wanted and asked for.
It's what we all initially wanted. Yes, I wanted a Dark Souls fucking MMO with hard to dodge and getting your ass handed to you by hard bosses game. This guy is just some sort of like hardcore fucking sandbox player, bro. This guy has no idea what an actual successful MMORPG is. Are you shitting me? Come on, man. I'm sorry. I'm fucking sorry, bro. This guy is like a Rust, fucking Conan Exiles kind of player. He put it this way. He is talking about how bad the PvE is, how bad of a job they did of putting in PvE into the game. But in the beginning of his video, he even said that the initial versions of the game, which I myself played, by the way, he's not the only grand master of fucking alphas over here, that there was no buildings, no cities, no dungeons, no nothing. It was just an empty PvP, PK infested fucking fest of just sandbox. That's it. That's all it was. If he thinks for a second that if New World would have launched with none of the stuff they had in it right now, that it would have been as successful as it was on launch, he is crazy. He is nuts. Don't get me wrong. I completely agree with the fact that Amazon made the decision to swap from PvP to like theme box way too late. They didn't have enough time to make all the content that they would have wanted to, which might have included more dungeons, more raids, and more zones. But with what they launched with was enough to get people occupied and to make box sales for at least a couple of months. Imagine if this would have been a free-to-play sandbox criminal-based PK game. It would have been dead on arrival. It would have had less players than fucking Crowfall. Dark Souls. Get out of here, bro.
This would also create some undesired effects, such as the ability to make your character skate by quickly changing directions mid-movement. The reason that combat felt worse to me, though, really had to do with the fact that they shifted to hit scan over projectiles for performance issues. This made shooting a gun feel far less consistent with the setting and less easy to aim. Now, I'm a big proponent of hit scan and maybe a super competitive
Shroud hit me in the face pretty fucking hard with a musket that one time.
That actually has a projectile that actually takes time to travel there, why not just use the projectile? In my opinion, it really ruined the tempo of the gunplay in New World, which was some of the best, I think, in an MMORPG period. Still, despite these issues, New World had quite a strong start out of the gate. But as I always urge, and have urged historically, caution with rocket-like launches. An MMORPG is built on longevity, so the game doing well the first month is important to get some eyes on it and to get some money in the developers' pockets so they can afford things, but it's not as important as doing well in a year. New World's last-minute shift to PvE-centric MMO wasn't going to hold up well compared to titles like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, and Elder Scrolls Online.
And the sandbox wouldn't have held up well either.
While it might grab the initial player base, I was hesitant in thinking it would keep them for very long due to lacking the name recognition and the story focus as the other titles previously mentioned. Within a month, those dreamy player counts were in a sharp decline, being reported on by even Forbes, down 62% to 357,000 players peak. AGS was even trying to give away copies for free in some people's eyes as a way to just keep the player counts up. Besides reasons already covered, why was New World losing population so quickly? Well, simply put, the grind put forth didn't feel worth it for most players. Lost Ark
came out.
There wasn't enough endgame, and once you got to the endgame anyway, it just wasn't good enough. Not compared to competitors. And AGS was sadly going to be incentivized from a progression standpoint to just slow progression from launch onward, which doesn't sound too crazy if that progression wasn't the same copy-paste quests and chests and some points of interest.
And Walker and then Lost Ark happened.
The worst part is they didn't even have the guts to do this publicly. They chose to stealthily nerf progression during their first major update instead. AGS trying to address the PvP issues I and many others, I am sure, outlined early on after launch seemed just a too little too late thing. We already knew that people wouldn't PvP because there just wasn't a reason to, and we could have predicted this not because of a crystal ball, but because of paying attention to other MMOs that have launched and studying their systems and audience reception to such.
Because casuals don't like the PvP,
felt like
bro.
An MMORPG created just in a vacuum, with absolutely no market research done. And you can't just fix that with a few content patches. With the population down yet again, this time by December 2021 to 145,000 peak players, AGS was forced to merge some of their servers in New World already. They would then merge again later in the same month, and while merges aren't proof that the game is going to be shuttered, they aren't really a good sign so early on. New World unmistakably was at a low player count. Some servers were down to just a few mere 100 players, even after the merges. Within 2 more
F's in chat for East, one of the best servers in the history of New World. Thank you.
Months, the population would dip to 67,000 players by February of 2022. A month later, and the former studio head of Amazon Game Studios, Mike Frazzini, would leave the company, citing a desire to spend more time with his family. Now, Mike Frazzini was a bit of a lightning rod of Amazon Game Studios, but rightfully so, as the head of the studio having no prior game experience. Largely, gaming for Amazon has been an abrupt failure. They're able to get initial successes, like with New World and Lost Ark, but within a few months, their populations dropped down significantly. New World would announce their first big content update in the end of March, set for sometime soon in the summer. The changes are set to bring a new weapon, more story quests, and content to the game. But the problem with the content update, besides it being a rather lean offering, is that, well, what I discussed earlier regarding perishable versus non-perishable goods.
It has happened
because
already.
AGS pivoted New World towards a more perishable style of content, which isn't necessarily bad, it's just not sustainable by design. They were inherently going to be very reliant on content updates to succeed. This would put New World in a difficult position, as population has continued to shrink down now to 34,000 players peak, over 90% of the population dropped at this point, and as less players play the game, AGS will likely have to put less money and time into the updates, which kind of creates that self-fulfilling prophecy. New World is on the ropes, and even if you're a fan, you can't deny that losing over 90% of the population from launch isn't good. And with lean content offerings on the horizon, there's not much to be optimistic about the future of New World either, and I'm ready to put my name on it. I don't trust the developers much to salvage the product either, when most of the game's updates thus far are just focusing on fixing the game that they launched. They haven't even had time to actually add something really new or innovative in the game because they're too busy fixing half-baked systems. Systems I frankly speaking don't have much faith of them delivering on. With too much of the sand out of New World for it to exist on its own, with slow or meager content updates, I believe it's on a further path towards its demise.
This guy's a dark motherfucker, let me tell you.
That's the Music Detective's final deduction time. Let's take the gathered clues and evidence and outline the largest contributing factors behind the death of a game, New World. AGS lacked proper MMO experience and developers. 180 to their game design during closed beta. Content design and offering has no longevity and it isn't competitive. Offers nothing innovative nor otherworldly worthy of the Amazon name. Hobbled too early to a launch. Displayed a severe lack of market and competitor research. It feels like it was just made in a vacuum.
What does that mean, made in a vacuum?
Now, the whole being made in a vacuum thing is honestly pretty bad, but the worst part about New World to me is the sheer scale of the failure. Hundreds of millions potentially, and yet the lack of market research is just appalling once you put it into perspective. How can you
imagine thinking that hundreds and millions of people would have played a sandbox PvP Dark Souls game in just open world with PKing and having your fucking gear stolen from you every time you die in 2022? Stop it. Fucking stop it.
You put that much money into an industry and not even hire the experts in what you're creating? Why not take the Eastern developer approach like Yoshi P or Yuji Naka did? Choose a few prominent online RPGs and just play the hell out of them as a team and study them. If you don't have MMO experience like they didn't, at least be open to
experience. You can't say that they don't play other MMOs.
But when are developers and bigwigs going to realize that video game developers isn't the same as an MMORPG video game developer?
As I say, Ian doesn't play WoW.
MMORPGs are the most complex genre for a reason. They actually simulate worlds. They have world persistence, massive amounts of players playing them and playing them simultaneously, and do things on a massive scale. This is far more complex than just a game with a guild system or a friends list. When Amazon comes into the space ignoring the rules and lessons learned by other MMORPGs, it's a painful but important lesson that no matter how big and powerful you are, you can't skip go. You can't skip the process without paying your due diligence. And if you can't hire experienced MMO developers, as they can kind of be unicorns, at least hire some developers who passionately play MMOs, or consult with people who do, and actually listen. Thanks for watching, guys.
Stop it.
Our fight has just begun.
If I had to make an MMORPG, I would not listen to this guy. This guy would be like, all right, guys, these guys have to be really hard, all right? Everything has to be extremely difficult. I want to build my own towns, and I want to grow apples in my fields that take 19 days to grow, and then when I come back, I can pick them and give it to my friends. Look, I am not even denying the fact that New World is in a bad state, right? Like, I'm not a New World stan. I play when I play. When I play, I have fun. I have more fun playing now because they fixed the majority of the game. The majority of the game to me is now like what I would have wanted it to be if it was launched. All those reasons about this guy not being an MMO developer and that guy not being an MMO developer, none of that it matters to me. What the reason people left wasn't because of all of his shit that he was talking about it not being the way it was supposed to be, Sam, blah, 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 blah. People left because of the bugs, because of the duping, because of the video card system, because of the issues with the games. If New World had launched and there was no bugs, no go duping, none of that would have happened, I guarantee you that player base would still be healthier. It wouldn't be like 1 million, but it would be healthier. You know what I'm saying? He wants that Mortal Online kind of stuff. I don't know, man. I will not deter from what I said. I think AGS made absolutely the right decision when they got away from the PvP sandbox and went to PvE. They just did it too late. They didn't have enough time, and they were also trying to develop all that PvE in a climate when the world wasn't exactly in a good spot in general. Yeah, I mean the fact that he bashed them for delays without even mentioning what was going on in the world is fucking asinine. Considering almost every other major AAA title in that time was also delayed. Yeah, to me that's the only thing I take out of it. You know, the reason for the direction and the developers, maybe marketing, people not knowing exactly what, the experience of making it PvE, considering these guys are mostly like kind of fighter-based, Crucible, PvP, breakaway kind of people. Yeah, I mean, they didn't do it in time. And right now they're trying to make up for lost time. That's what they're doing now. That's why the updates coming up are updates that are mainly, a little bit PvP, but mainly PvE oriented, man. They just never had a chance to catch up. I mean, I think they would have needed to delay New World probably like another maybe year and a half to give it the amount of content that people would have wanted for like PvE.